All right, we're here with CHASA Commissioner Rhonda Blanford-Green. Rhonda, thanks for taking the time out to sit down with me for what's going to be a pretty unique first ever CHASA virtual summer conference.
Yes. Excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this should be a lot of fun. So we went ahead and took questions directly from our student membership, which is the first time we've ever done this. So we're looking forward to hearing what our student membership has to say and hearing your response to the questions. So
Well, can I tell you this, Justin? I am excited that these questions are coming from actual students across because I figured the way that we've been working in this COVID that my staff made up questions for me and to put me on the spot. So thank you all our student leaders who presented questions, submitted questions. This is going to be fun. So this is your opportunity to be the head talent of an interview.
Absolutely.
The male Oprah.
That's right. Yeah, I have big shoes to fill there. Yeah. So our first question, we'll just jump right into it. Ron, our first question is from Riley Osborne of Flatirons Academy, and Riley asks, Rhonda, you are not only the first female leader of the Colorado High School Activities Association, but also the first minority leader in the association's history. What advice would you give to a young female student leader who wants to make a similar impact?
Wow. Well, I'm always honored. I know you never want to be identified specifically by your ethnicity or your gender in terms of someone describing you within your job, but actually I'm the first African American black female to ever run a state association in the nation in 100-year history. I guess the advice that I would give is that you follow your passion and your dreams, and you don't let anyone tell you that something hasn't happened so that name can't be yours. Because if I had gone into this profession and someone said, well, there's never been a black female in this position, I would say, oh, well, guess that means I can't sit there. Somehow that needs to be a motivator. What does it take for me to break that glass ceiling, for me to open that door for the first time? So my thing would be to educate yourself on your dream and your passion and align yourself, create networks around those things, and when that opportunity comes, make sure that you're the best candidate at the table, and it'd be hard for them to tell you no. So I guess that would be my advice, is to just align yourself.
So you were a pretty well decorated student athlete yourself here in Colorado at Aurora Central, and kind of a follow up to the first question were, who were some of the leaders that you looked up to when you were a student at Aurora Central?
Well, I think that people try to look for professional or very visible. Mine are pretty humbling and were part of my life's journey. So I start off with my parents. I have a very strong female figure in my life, and my dad was kind of the more sensitive side. And then I can honestly tell you that I don't sit in this chair today without my coaches, without teachers. That I have to say my desk was outside of the classroom for a fair amount of time when I was in elementary school. And no one gave up on me. They saw that spirit. They saw that sassiness. Someone who wanted to be in the front of the line, who wanted to always clean the erasers. I know you guys don't know what erasers are on a blackboard, but yes,
Right.
we had those, and they directed that in the right direction. So to answer your question, I would have to say it would be my parents, and then it would be my teachers and coaches from the time that I was in kindergarten up until college. And I also want to say that it would be my bosses that have allowed me to take my creativity and out of the box thinking, and they allowed me to fail. Nobody expected me to be perfect. They allowed me to fail and then use teachable moments to get me to the place I am today.
Riley, that's a great question from Riley, and I think
Absolutely.
Riley's got someone that she can look up to in you. So,
Oh, thank you.
so the next question we've got is from John Kellerman at Arvada West, and John wants to know, the COVID-19 pandemic has made it difficult to engage with fellow students and our broader communities. What alternatives to traditional in-person networking do you suggest, or maybe that we've done here at CHASA, that you would suggest for students to stay connected?
Well, I was gonna try to be funny and say, we're in a pandemic, but I'm not gonna say that. You know, this is tough. Humans are social beings.
I know.
And so to have to shut that down, whether I just saw something on the Twitter the other day. It was a little girl who wanted to go to McDonald's just to play in the play group in the playroom. While she said, you know, sitting in the car waiting for our food is boring. We used to get to play until our food came, right? And so we are social beings. So this has been really hard in terms of connections, and especially youth students tend to be a little bit more social in that area. But the alternatives are what we're doing right now, which is making sure that we stay connected to our membership and that we let people know that we care and that we miss them, because we also kind of get energized every start of the school year with student leadership from when we come to the summer meeting and we all leave there going, gosh, this is what we do. These kids give us energy. And so the alternatives are, in order to be safe and to uphold CDC guidelines, state and health officials' guidelines, we're doing things virtually. But we're trying not to be so scripted that we don't allow just the natural flow that's normally part of conversation also come out in our virtual meetings. And I think that's becoming more important than this, you know, bop, 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 bop. It's like, yeah, you can laugh, you can be yourself. And I think that's what we miss, is the personality in these Zooms and meetings.
Yeah, we've done some great things we probably never would have thought of before. As we're talking right now, we've got a student advisor webinar going on right now where they're just sharing ideas and coming up with some ways to kind of better themselves professionally. So that's something before this pandemic we never really used Zoom much, never thought about. So that's been a great thing to do. So John kind of wants to know as well as you know, what's been the biggest struggle for CHASA without being able to have, you know, in-person meetings and the events suspended over the last few months, and how are we working to overcome it with, you know, Zoom and some of the virtual options?
Well, different from other state associations, because I've had the opportunity to work in Nebraska and Louisiana. Colorado has probably the highest meeting ratio of any other state association. I think we have about 92 meetings a year. And so, good or bad, it's just what we do. We connect with our people probably more than other state associations. So during this dial back, we've had to kind of prioritize. Well, when it's completely shut down, there's no priority. If you're going to have a meeting, you're going to find a way to make that happen. And I think we are going to probably adopt that mentality moving forward. But that's probably been one of the hardest for us, is just losing that kind of round table, you know, conversation and really truly share of ideas. Because if anyone says that a Zoom meeting rivals an in-person meeting or is even similar, it isn't. Because you have those that won't engage. At least when we're conducting meetings, we'll see that quiet leader in our group. Absolutely. And we'll say, hey, what do you think, Michael? Or what do you think, Ashley? When you're on a Zoom, you don't really know to engage that person. And a lot of times, our quiet leaders contribute more than the one person who's got to have a word every 10 minutes, right?
That's a good point. Absolutely. Absolutely. Our next question comes from Jade Pruitt of Durango High School. And Jade wants to know, how can student leaders best educate their peers about COVID-19 and deal with some of the opposing opinions on safety guidelines that are there throughout our state?
Sure. And I think anybody who's staying informed knows that in March and April, we were together as communities, as states, as a nation, to try to flatten the curve, was a word. And we were just on board. We were willing to do whatever it took to make sure that we weren't spreading, or that we could at least just maybe understand more about what we were dealing with, but do it in the safety of our home. As we look at where we are today, there's just this polarization of ideas that are out there. It's become very political. People have taken stances one way or the other, right, to kind of voice their opinions, but it's got that underlying politicism
Right,
to it.
right.
And so I think what student leaders can do is be very aware of the data that's out there. And I say that you, no different than what we're doing as administrators, is we're staying away from engaging in conversations that would maybe split the opinion. So if the advice I would give is stick to the facts as
Right.
closely as possible. And you go, whose facts, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of facts out there, but really there are some simple things that conversations can be around that aren't arguing.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
argue
yeah.
against them. And I think as leaders, you just keep reminding people that we're in this together. Wash your hands, XYZ, social distance, stay away from the mask conversation right now. I
right.
think that could really start some controversy. But just some of the simple things, and just remind people, you guys are in a age group right now that originally low risk, and you weren't contracting the disease, and there was no medical documentation. But now you're in a place where they're saying that potentially those that you come in contact. So remember, it's not an argument about whether it's about you. It's about everybody around you that supports what you would want to do. So that's kind of the conversation that needs to be more in the forefront than the age group we're serving. Can't have a game without officials.
Right.
Okay? Can't go to school without teachers in the classroom. So there's a whole subset of adults around you that we all have to be very mindful of and protecting their safety as well.
Yeah. So Nikki Jo Albert from Del Norte, one of our smaller schools in our association, kind of followed up to that question and said, Colorado has many rural, urban, and mountain communities. What do you see as the biggest challenge in kind of creating a similar mindset around COVID-19 with all of our different communities?
Well, the CHASA staff, I mean, that's what we do.
Right.
Although there's lots of conversations about, we're in the metro area, so we serve the metro area, but our association has been serving rural communities and presenting bylaws and competitive opportunities for our rural schools recently at a higher rate than we have, because there have been some challenges in our outside areas. So I guess my answer to that would be, is I can assure you that when we are making decisions, no different than we would without a pandemic, our rural schools, our small schools are in the forefront, and we're not asking them to do or be something that would be prevalent in the metro area. So they're in the forefront, and they're part of any decision that we make. They don't have to follow behind. Sometimes they're the leaders in why we do certain things that we do.
Yeah. I think ultimately we just want everybody to be safe and hopefully getting back
Absolutely.
on the playing
But
field and with activities as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but I think they need to hear that we're not making decisions because our metro area schools make a decision. I think a prime example is when schools started shutting down. The majority of our schools in the outer lying areas did not shut down, and CHASA stayed lockstep with the majority of our membership. So I think we have already set examples and made decisions that show that we are making decisions based on the best interest of the membership, and not just certain areas or groups.
Right. All right, our next question comes from Walker Bargman of Eagle Ridge Academy. And I would say, obviously, other than being able to work with me on a daily basis, what's your, what's your favorite part of being the commissioner of CHASA?
Wow, I think, I say this all the time, many of our administrators have been part of athletics and activities. And so I guess the best part of being the commissioner is knowing that we're planting seeds for the next Justins, Ryans, Rhondas, out of 360 member schools. So I think that's the most exciting part, is raising the bar and providing the best high school experience through our programs, and know that we're making an impact across the state. That doesn't happen in every job.
Right.
You know, if you could be a Bronco fan, you can be a CU fan, but CHASA impacts every community across the state of Colorado. And I think that's the most fun of our job is we've got kids in Lamar, we have kids in Sterling, we have kids in Pagosa Springs, and CHASA has the ability to make their high school experience elevated through what we do. And that's the best part of our job, my job.
Right. Great question, Walker. All right. Jonathan Pazin from Dakota Ridge asks, there's a lot of uncertainty around athletics for the upcoming school year, in particular fall sports. What is CHASA's plan to safely administer athletics and activities in this time of COVID-19?
Yeah, next question.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. You just asked a question that is being asked across the nation, across the world, with professional sports, collegiate sports, high school sports, youth sports. The thing about COVID is that it is dictating that we don't have definitive answers right now.
Fluid,
Our state and health officials look at the phases and they think we're moving in the right direction, and then we have a resurgence, and then we have to take steps back. The beauty of Colorado is we've been pretty consistent, and we haven't had to make drastic step backs in the governor's decisions. But sometimes when you see things happening on the outside, sometimes they trickle into the inside. So there's a level of apprehension about what this will look like in a month with what's going on outside of us. But we absolutely have plans to move forward, and with contingencies, and also with disruptions and potentially shutdowns. So our staff has been working since March, since April. We've been throwing out ideas. We're putting them into some finality at this point, but my standard answer is we would like to resume at the normal or regular season, protect our school seasons, knowing that state and health guidelines will ultimately dictate how this will all play out.
Yeah. So Lily Berg of Columbine High School asks, so CHASA's revamped its summer event model. This summer was supposed to be our rollout of our new summer conference model.
Yes.
And it was going to include not only student leadership students, but also student athletes as a whole, which was something that we were really looking forward to. Unfortunately, COVID-19 had different ideas, and we've gone to a virtual model. But Lily wants to know, what benefit do you see in creating leaders among the entire student population with this new format of including all of our students and not just the student leadership students, that to, again, create leaders among the entire student population?
Sure. When I first started at CHASA in 1996, we actually had a summer meeting, and then we had regional outreaches, right? And we used to call them, I think, like regional showcases or something like that. And then we pulled back on those, and I think that when we did that, we lost, I use the word subset, but a group of kids that, again, you go back to the rural area and the mountain schools. Those kids are involved in fall activities and fall sports, and they can't get away every time like a kid who specializes. So I think the positives of this regional format is we will be able to bring in more students. It will be less of a commitment for a kid who participates in more than one. I think it will be more cost efficient. Yep. Right? And so I really love this model because it's now, and I don't know why we didn't think of that when I had student leadership. It takes all the positives of a big summer meeting, and then it takes all the positives of a regional outreach, combines them, and I think that what we're gonna see is more impact at the local level because of the reduction in just kind of that commitment.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to finally get back to in-person.
I know, I'm excited. I'm excited. We might have to do road trips and visit you guys at every regional
That's
spot.
right, that's right. All right, so we mentioned earlier that you were the first minority leader in the association's what's now going to be 100-year history. Colorado has a very diverse student population, does not seem to be reflected in the number of educational leaders in our state. During this unprecedented time where millions are fighting for racial justice, what changes can the association make to help promote a positive change and continue this narrative?
That is interesting that you asked that question. Prior to the pandemic, I was on a panel, and one of the things that the audience member asked was, how do we uh, expand our numbers, not only with minorities, but even females in a lot of the leadership roles that we don't see that a lot. And I said, you know what? I think that you guys have to hold us accountable. I sit in this chair for women who opened that door for me, kind of took some of the heat of females in athletic arenas. And I think CHASA, needs to do a better job of helping to recruit, helping that narrative, how important diversity is in the workplace. And I don't know that we have done that as much as we should, but I also think that you, student leaders, women in these fields, have to hold the decision makers accountable as well. So when you do have a job open, make sure that that person says, okay, how many minority candidates should we have in here? And it's not tokenism. Like that's the thing that probably bothers me the most, is someone thinks they have to do it to justify. We have to do a better job of educating people. Like, those candidates should be in the pool because they make your business better. And you know what? Sometimes the check boxes can't always be the same. Like, this is what happened. I'm a prime example of the check boxes that are supposed to be for an assistant commissioner for CHASA, right? Came in at 32 years old. I had not been an AD before, but what my boss saw is that I brought something different to the table, that a checkbox of an athletic director maybe wasn't that, right?
Absolutely.
No different than you, right?
Sure.
To a certain extent.
Yep.
Like, you have to be willing, if you believe that you are strengthened by diversity in the workplace or diversity in your student government, then you create a process around that that supports the strengths that that candidate maybe wouldn't bring if it looked like it did 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So I go back to, you have to believe in a strengthened, diverse group, not only because they'll make you step outside of your comfort zone and box, but it makes you a better leader to have all those different perspectives as you represent the students or even the workforce that you're held accountable to represent.
I couldn't agree more, and I think you've done a great job in promoting that here at CHASA.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
we're one of the most diverse groups we have 51 state associations across the NFHS. And then I go back to that tokenism, right? So back in the day when everybody's like, oh my gosh, we got to have women on staff, we have to have minority on staff, you'd see one.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, one woman, one minority. This is what I love about Bob Ottewell, who was the commissioner here. There was a female position open, but 2 administrators left at the same time. So everybody's like, okay, that one position is going to be a woman, so everybody applied over here. So Bob Ottewell says, no, I'm bringing in who I think is going to be best for the job, and he hired 2 women at one time. Holy cow, was that controversial? And then look at it now. I mean, a lot of our states have embraced it, but Bob Ottewell stepped out of that box, had 2 positions, and didn't say, okay, I got one woman over here, so this other one is reserved for whomever. He was like, no, I'm getting ready to do this. So it's interesting. I'll say this one more time. First African-American administrator at CHASA, but also the first African-American hire as an administrator in 2 other state associations. So in 2005 and up, really, I'm going to be the one that goes to give your state association a little diversity and color. Like, the leaders and the decision makers have to agree that that's important, and sometimes that's going out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So recently, we've seen athletes that have been using their voice to kind of shed light on some of these issues that we've been talking about. NBA, MLS, Major League Baseball, the professional leagues have promoted racial and social justice in various ways. Do you anticipate this upcoming school year any of our student athletes using their voices in a similar manner?
Yes, I do. I'm excited because I think we talked about this, Justin, is I think you guys are the voices. You are going to be the messengers I just think student leaders are so much more impactful when your voices are out there. No different than when we had to suspend the basketball tournament in spring sports. We reached out to student athletes to speak to what this meant to them, because you can hear it from me, you can hear it from a staff member, but when you hear it from a student that yes, this is what happened to us, but this is how we're overcoming and persevering through this, I think that it touched our public and our membership more intently. So I think you and I have some work that we'll do once we
Sure.
get school back into place and we have some level of normalcy, to really use this opportunity to not only address social and racial issues, but we have a lot of things that maybe we've been walking on eggshells, afraid to have this conversation for fear that it would incite some cultural or alumnus or whatever. But I think there'll be a couple areas that we will touch on. But I think it's important. One other thing that I'll say is you had a minority commissioner that when all of this started to go down, didn't feel comfortable taking my personal feelings and projecting them through the CHASA social media, right? Because we always have to play it safe because we have a lot of people that we serve. But I have this, you can't see him, he's behind the camera, millennial social justice. He doesn't shop at certain places, doesn't eat at certain places because of their views. And he was the one, young white guy, that came to me and said, "Boss, you need to take a stance." And we had a conversation, and there were some of us, I mean, there was a spectrum. We had some over here very conservative. No, this is not what CHASA does. You shouldn't get in this fray. Move on. And then you had my millennial, my social justice
Sure.
going, you know, boss, this is our time to really speak to something. And then you kind of had me in the middle, and I'm just like, oh, should I go right? Should I go left? I don't want to cause social media to blow up, and I don't want them to say, of course she feels that way because she's a black woman. And like, I couldn't have a bigger thought process. So
Absolutely.
we took little baby steps the first day, then we did Blackout Tuesday, then it was like the NASCAR, Black Lives Matter, and we kind of got a little bit more confidence as we went along. But I think the cultural shift now is you should not be afraid and you should not feel intimidated to not have a strong voice in some of the areas that you believe in. So I'm looking forward to the students driving this conversation and feeling supported by the CHASA membership to take some new steps in areas that we haven't. And we've walked on eggshells and not done it. And I think this is going to be our time.
Wow, that was great. Rhonda, really appreciate you taking the time. That's all the questions that we have for you.
Absolutely.
I know our students, student membership will be grateful for open and honest
Oh,
answers.
thank you. And I just want to thank you, Justin, and shout out to Rashawn and shout out to Whitney. You guys don't always see what happens behind the scenes, and this, you know, we're kind of bantering back and forth and we make it look easy, but there's been a lot of work behind the scenes, and a lot of research behind the scenes with other states to see the best way that we could present this to Colorado. And because I'm competitive, I think Colorado does it the best, right? So I just want to thank you. I want to thank Rashawn. I want to thank Whitney and the many student leadership sponsors out there, because people want to put sports in the forefront all the time, but really truly the grit and the grind is sometimes right in the building, and it's done with student leaders. And so I just want to thank you guys. Have a great virtual conference, and I look forward to seeing you maybe this fall.
Thank you.
Thank you.